with the hindrances, I've used this analogy before, but I'm just gonna explain it again. If any of you have gone scuba diving or been out into the ocean, if you're still close to the shore, the turbulence of those waves is really noticeable and visceral. It's something that you have to, you're just constantly be getting dragged by the waves. But if you go far out enough into the ocean and you go down past that that area that's closer to the shore, you'll experience very, very still and motionless water. It's the same way with your meditation practice. Like your initial sessions or your initial 30 minutes or hour of a practice is that water that's close to the shore. You're just constantly being assailed by the hindrances: doubt, restlessness, sleepiness, agitation, sensual desire. And it's coming up, cycling. You get through one hindrance and then another one comes up, or you relax through sensual desire and now doubt is arisen. So this is all the training wheel part of the session, or just dealing with the obstacles in the meditation practice. When you've sat for long enough or you've developed enough skill, you're able to cross over or circumvent those hindrances. At some point they just don't arise anymore, or if they do, they're very minor. So for me, the only real hindrance I deal with is sleepiness. I don't really get any of the other ones anymore. So as a result of more skill that you develop, you have a greater capacity for dealing with the hindrances. And from doing longer meditation sits, you just have more time to really allow the mind to settle and to just go through that rough, those rough waters into the quiet mind, into the deep stillness. So today we'll do a loving kindness meditation, like we did last week. I'll guide some of it, and that'll be our practice for today. Does anyone have questions pertaining to the subject matter of the video or anything that we've been learning up to this point? There's got to be some questions.
What was his point about loving kindness choosing same sex, not a family member?
Yeah, I think his point about if you're gay, don't use the same sex because you could be attracted to the person. I think that was his way of approaching it, or it's not specifically delineated in the sutras what to do if you are gay. So he just said, I'll give you a different object, but I'm not sure what the approach is in the TWIM organization right now, now that Bhante is not teaching. But I think you're all adults, so just pick a person that you wouldn't be sexually attracted to, and you should be fine. And the point he was making about not picking family members is because in the beginning of your loving kindness practice, he doesn't want you to pick a person that you would have any kind of animosity or resentment towards, at least in the beginning. Later, when you develop your loving kindness, or your loving kindness is more mature, you explore different objects. So like the first is the spiritual friend. That's the easiest object. That's the person a person that you would have absolutely no resistance or resentment towards. Then you move to a neutral person, and then you move to I know there's four main objects of loving kindness, but eventually you move towards the person that's called the enemy. So that means someone that you have actual deep resentment for, or that you have not great feelings about. So you would take that person as the object once your loving kindness is strong and mature, and you would send them metta. So that can be very profound, very powerful once you get to that stage. But the reason he doesn't suggest that at the beginning is because then you just start ruminating in the resentment, and you start reliving situations from the past in the mind. So he offers it as a later object, or a later subject for your meditation practice.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Hey Ryan, it's Linda. When you said that the fourth object would be like someone you hate, what if you don't hate anyone? Like, would it be like maybe like people who like generally like bad or evil people would be your object?
It's a good question. Yeah,
hard to hate. Really, I don't mean to sound cliche. I just really don't feel like hate towards anyone.
Yeah,
I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah, so I don't even have dislike towards people, so I hear you. But if you did have dislike towards a person, so if there's no hatred, then you go for dislike. So dislike is like you think of that person and they just leave like a bad taste in your mouth or something. If you don't have that, then all you can do is use a neutral person. So yeah, because you can think of bad people, but if you don't actually feel dislike for them, then it's not. It's the same as using a neutral person. So the loving kindness is not like it's not like a healing prayer, So just because the person is quote unquote a bad or evil person, it doesn't mean that makes it particularly different than a neutral object, because the point here is purification of your own mind. So that's why you use the hated person or the disliked person, because to take them as a meditation object, your heart has to actually expand in order to send them metta and loving kindness, and really begin to develop that loving kindness for them. But if you don't hate anyone, and if you don't dislike anyone, then you would just use a neutral person. Or maybe there's someone that hurt you earlier in your life and you don't dislike them and you don't hate them anymore, but that's like the closest that you could get to dislike. It's like you've forgiven them, but the pain's still there. That would be closer to dislike, even though you don't necessarily dislike them. We got a question here. Yeah, you can. Question was, can you do loving kindness towards a pet? Yes. Yeah, because loving kindness is extended to animals, but in this format that was presented by Bhante, it was just for a person. But in other places where loving kindness is taught, the object isn't just for a person, and it's also not just for a living being. The reason that he designates it as a person and as a living being is one, the spiritual friend is someone that you have respect for, and a lot of people often choose like a monk or a nun, or that you're just having it in that vein of like spiritual practice. The reason with pets, there's like a lot of attachment to a pet if the pet has died. So, and also there's a lot of attachment to a person if the person has died. One second. I guess the contractor just doesn't see that I'm teaching a class. Anyways, So, so the loving kindness can be used towards a pet, but I recommend that the pet be living. Otherwise, it can be a very like emotionally intense process. So. Okay. What was that? What else was there? What was coming to mind? Yeah. Someone that hurt you, dislike, and hate. There's a spectrum right here. Because you go any further this way and you just get neutrality. So I think that's the best way that I would answer that. And the loving kindness, just to give a brief on the instruction, because I don't think you were here for the last class, Linda. So how the loving kindness works is you have like 10% of your attention on the image of the person, but 90% of your attention is on the feeling of the loving kindness. So I would use, let's say I'm going to use the Dalai Lama or some other spiritual figure. So I would see that person's face in my chest, and I would be placing them like inside that feeling of loving kindness and of the heart. And I would say, may you be happy, may you be healthy. But just use the phrases so that the feeling could be tapped. Like if you could just stay with the feeling of enveloping them in loving kindness, then you don't need to use words, because the feeling is the most important thing. So what happens is the feeling begins to expand. It takes up a lot of our attention, and we find that naturally from the pleasantness of the loving kindness that the mind begins to quiet down, and the normal level of movement that it's engaging in really simmers. So loving kindness is a really good practice because it is very pleasant. So like every time you bring your mind back to the spiritual friend and you send them loving kindness, you smile every time that you do that. So whenever your mind wanders, you recognize that your mind has wandered, and you relax, and then you return to the meditation object, which would be the feeling of loving kindness that you're sending this particular person. So every time your mind wanders, you'll notice that the body tenses up a little bit, and that your smile has disappeared, or it's like gone back down. So you smile again, and then you feel the loving kindness. There's like a subtle joy that comes from the smiling, and that really helps with the continuity of your awareness on the loving kindness. So this was like a whole process, and I'll send the email on it, or I'll send Eric the email, or you can send me your email and I'll send it to you, that goes over this whole like cyclical thing that I'm explaining. It's called the 6 R's. It's just a very easy way to deal with mind wandering in meditation, so that every time your mind wanders, it actually helps you relax, which is really profound, because usually we see mind wandering as like a problem, but in this approach you actually see mind wandering as a chance to let go more. Every time your mind wanders, eventually your mindfulness returns. You realize that your mind has wandered, but usually in most meditations the instruction is to just immediately go back to the meditation object. But the problem with that is, if your mind wanders to anger, or if your mind wanders to lust, or whatever it may be, if you tug the mind back to the meditation object immediately, it's possible to actually like bring the anger or whatever hindrance it is into your meditation practice, or merge it with your object essentially. So the way to avoid that is this particular 6R process. When a distraction comes up, you let it be there, you relax the physiology, you smile again, and you return to the meditation object, to the feeling of loving kindness in this case.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm still not clear on why you can't meditate on a dead person or give loving kindness to a dead person. I know you're talking about attachment, but wouldn't that be a way to cut through the attachment?
You can meditate love. You can do loving kindness on a dead person. Remember that his instructions were for day 1 of a retreat. So it's in that context. So in that context is, don't meditate on a dead person because your loving kindness, the power behind it is not mature yet. So if you start to meditate on a dead person, you're just going to be grieving and not developing the loving kindness and going into the jhanas. So that's the whole background of that. When your loving kindness is stronger and you meditate on a person that is grief inducing that you've lost, it would be different compared to approaching that on the first day of a meditation retreat, where that power behind the loving kindness is not really built up and sufficient yet. There's a difference. So the idea is like, there's a differentiation between meditating on a person that you've lost so that you can tap into the grief and process it, and sending a departed person loving kindness as part of developing your samadhi and deepening your loving kindness practice. So outside of the retreat conditions and outside of the advice that he gave, yeah, it would be appropriate. At the end of most meditations, you send loving kindness to your departed relatives anyways. That's like sending merit to the people that you love that have passed on. But this is different. That's different than actually taking the person that is dead as a meditation object and walking around with them in your chest. So like, yeah, if your loving kindness is strong and you can handle that and you're not going to be crying, go for it. But if you do that and then you just start grieving, like, you'll have more of a grief retreat than a loving kindness retreat that is, leading you into these deeper states of meditation. So you can pick depending on what it is that you're going for that session or that day, because sometimes you do need to grieve and you do need to just feel those emotions and cry, and like not make it a meditation object, but just have it be room for processing. But that's different than developing your metta and using a challenging object in your metta as a way to strengthen your metta. Like, these are two different things. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
All right, so let's meditate now. Let's see. I'm gonna do this. Whoever needs to leave at 7:30, you can leave, but this meditation part is gonna be 45 minutes long. So if you need to go at 7:30 and head out, no problem. You're more than welcome to. But this sitting session will go for 45 minutes from now. So